Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're out the range to follow up on a video that we produced last year right around Father's Day. I had picked up a new USC 45 carbine. It looks a lot like this, except it has thumb hole stock on it, and it was something that H&K reintroduced. They had originally introduced the gun back in the 90s, early 2000s, and it was gray and had the polymer thumb hole stock on it and stuff like that, fired from a 10-round magazine. It was an import ban era gun, and H&K didn't want to produce them here in the United States. They had to import them in their band configuration, including their 10-round magazine. Well, a solution to that, if you don't like that particular configuration, is to send them out to a company like Tommybuilt, who will turn it into this glorious UMP, or what we like to call UMP, just to aggravate people that hate us Americans pronouncing acronyms as words. We'll turn it into this glorious, plastic, fantastic UMP. Semi-automatic version, of course. Well, this is my 45. Now, if you remember the video that I produced of the black USC, that one had all sorts of problems. The magazines were bad, the front sight was broken, and the gun didn't cycle 100% reliable, or was not 100% reliable. Didn't function reliably, is what I was trying to say. And so I was conflicted. I purchased it for Father's Day because I wanted to have that band configuration look, but if the gun doesn't work, I really don't want it. So I was conflicted. Ultimately, I sent it out to Tommybuilt to have it converted into another one of these. But why would I want two 45 UMPs? Well, I don't. So we're going to go ahead and fire off 25 rounds of 45 ACP. This is some Federal ammunition, 230 grain ball, and it is from our friends over at Federal. They supply ammunition to us here at the channel, and you can pick it up if you'd like to buy it from LAX Ammunition. We have a discount code down below for them. All right, so let's go ahead and fire off 25 rounds of 45 ACP. Then let me show you what I turned the USC into. I think you're going to like it. All right, sights are off on this bad boy, but you can see the recoil impulse is, pretty significant. On full auto, and I've shot them on full auto, they bounce around a lot. The sights kind of disappear in a blur. Not the most effective submachine gun, but as a semi-automatic carbine, it's pretty cool. While the 45 ACP to me doesn't make a whole lot of sense in the UMP simply because of the recoil that it generates, I thought a 9mm version was in order. Now this little gun is pretty darn cool. It doesn't have the same massive bolt inside there for its blowback action. It has a smaller, lighter bolt because the 9mm cartridge has a smaller profile barrel, and the gun just overall feels super lightweight, even with this Vortec red dot sight on top there, which we'll talk a little bit more about here later in the video. So the gun definitely feels better in the hand. Now the polymer makes sense. It feels a little chintzy. I mean, it's all plastic, but it feels good and it shoots okay. So I'm really glad to have converted the USC in 45 to the 9mm UMP, and eventually I think both of the guns I'll wind up SBRing and putting a short barrel on it because it is kind of goofy having that 16-inch barrel. But overall, I'm really happy with the conversion that Tommybuilt did with the gun. Now, once again, I had to send him the gun. I had to buy the lower receiver here and other parts from hkparts.net to complete the conversion. You have to send him all the parts, and then he puts it all together for you. And if you contact Tommybuilt, you can find him on Instagram. Just look for Tommybuilt. If you contact him, he'll tell you where to find what parts and what parts you do need if you want to do the conversion. Now, I've also noticed over on Atlantic Firearms, the Gideon Receivers, I think they're Omega Gideon Receivers, are available, and they're also polymer, and they're not made by H&K like this one. On here you can still see the H&K marks, but you could burn that logo and stuff in there if you really wanted to, because Tommybuilt's a full custom shop if you want to send it to him for markings perhaps. But yeah, they're making the polymer receivers, and then you buy the rest of the parts from hkparts.net, and you can assemble your own UMP. Now the receivers I think are $7.99, and the hkparts.net parts are going to be fairly expensive. You're going to have quite a bit of money in the gun by the time it's all said and done, but you can do it yourself. You don't have to wait for a custom shop to put it together. I like this one because I really enjoy Tommy Bilt's work because he does such amazing work. I have several of his guns now. All right, I'm gonna stop talking and do a little bit of shooting. On top here, this is a Vortex optic. And like I said, we'll delve a little bit more into this red dot sight here in a minute in the video, but it may look big and clunky on the gun. It's not that heavy of a sight. It's about as big as an EOTech really, and about the same weight, and it balances nicely on the gun. Have some 9mm ball in here from our friends from Federal. I'm gonna go ahead and lock the bolt open. It makes it a little bit easier on a full mag. You can rotate the charging handle up just like an MP5 and lock the bolt open. Then the magazine inserts nice and easily. Slap it down and ready to fire. And it does have a 30-round magazine versus a 25. Try not to shoot the rubber dummy in the exact same spot every time because I'm gonna chew a big hole in the center. But the bolt locks open and everything. What a fun gun. The magazines are readily available. They have US versions and then German made versions. I highly recommend getting the German versions, both in the 45 and the 9mm, because I've had problems with the USA made magazines. So spring for the extra money and actually get the HK produced magazines because they're gonna run better for you. Now this one has the full auto markings on it, but it only goes to fire. It's blocked on the inside. So it is not a full auto trigger group inside the gun. Many times when you buy parts from hkparts.net, you're going to find that the parts are actually off a real machine gun that's been demilled, and so they're going to have some wear on it. You'll notice here on the pistol grip there's some dirt inside there. You'll see a few nicks and dings, and that's because it was originally on a submachine gun that got demilled, and then they go ahead and make the conversion to this lower trigger group to turn it into a semi-auto only. You'll also notice that some of the machine gun markings, that's the full auto selector position, have kind of rubbed off, and that's from use again. So be prepared to have some usage on the parts that you get from hkparts.net. Some will be more worn than others. So let's go over how the gun works. First of all, we have a folding stock here, which you push the button, it'll fold around to the side. Then there's a little detent right here that's molded into the receiver. Bring the stock over, kind of lift up, and it'll kind of hop onto that little peg there. And it'll stay in the folded position until you lift up on it and swing it out. Yes, you can fire the gun with the stock folded. You can see the ejection port right there. So if you really want to do that, it'll do it. But swing the stock open and it locks into place right there. And yeah, so we'll do a quick field strip for you here in a minute as well. So we have the selector lever here. It's just safe and fire. Does not go to that third position. Then we have a ping pong paddle here. So this is your bolt hold. So right now the bolt's in the open position. If I have the charging handle forward, not in the locked recess up here, and the bolts to the rear, all I have to do is hit that, and the bolt goes home and loads the weapon. Pull the bolt to the rear with the charging handle. I can push on that button and lock it, or I can turn this up into its locking recess here, like an MP5. Then for a magazine release, we have a flapper right here. It's in a good spot, so when you grab the magazine, your thumb naturally grabs that flapper and pulls the magazine out. Now, one thing I've noticed is these are metal 1913 rails. You can pick these up from hkparts.net as well. But these things, while good for mounting lights and the gun kind of looks naked without them, the charging handle's really close to these 1913 rails, which are metal, and they act like cheese graters. So when you grab this charging handle, you can run your hand across that cheese grater pretty easily and take some skin off. So that's one thing to be aware of. If you decide to go with these rails, you can put some rail protectors on there, which of course would stop that from happening. All right, let's run one more magazine and talk about this red dot sight. All right, I'm gonna hit the paddle release, charges the rifle, and now notice the recoil impulse. It's very, very mild. And like an AR-15, it talks to you. You can feel the bolt bounce back and lock in your shoulder so you know when it's empty. Grab that flapper release and pull it out. And I don't have any more magazines on me. I have to run over to the picnic table. So when I come back with another magazine, let's talk about this red dot sight from Vortex. The Vortex optic that I have on the UMP and 9mm is a really interesting sight. I've been playing with it for a while now. This conversion I've had in my possession for several months, and I put this on top of the gun because I thought it would look good. It's kind of a blocky looking gun, so I figured this blocky looking sight would look good on it, and I think it does look fairly good, fairly sharp on the Carbine. So what's this red dot sight all about? Well, first of all, it looks big and clumsy, but it's really not in hand. As I've already mentioned, the sight doesn't unbalance the gun, and the size and weight is very similar to an EOTech, like an HWS or XPS-1 or something like that, with a fairly small footprint. It also has a reticle that's very similar to what you would find on the EOTech. You have that circle with a dot in the center, and then this one has a chevron down at the 6 o'clock position. So that center dot is used for engaging targets from 100 to 400 meters or yards, and then that little chevron at the bottom is intended for 10 yards or 10 meters or closer for CQB. So you use that chevron at super close distances, and you use the dot for out to 400 meters. So it's an all aluminum housing. It's supposedly shock-proof, shatterproof lenses, and the color shift is ever so slight, but it's like a greenish tint to it, but it's not distracting at all. The sight is called the Vortex Razor AMG UH1, but in the manual they just keep referring to the sight as the UH1, which is what I'm going to call it. Why it says Razor AMG on it, I don't know, but it gets a little bit confusing, and it's a mouthful saying Vortex Razor AMG UH1. So the UH1 it is. The sight has, on the right-hand side, two adjustments. You have your elevation and your windage adjustment. And I believe it's 1/4. 1 click equals a half MOA. So you're going to move it a ½ inch at 100 yards per click. And then on the rear of the unit, you're going to have a familiar configuration. You have two buttons. Touching the button will turn the sight on. You can adjust the brightness. It has 15 different settings for extreme low light or extreme brightness. I found that it has plenty of brightness settings for either dark or bright direct sunlight. Pushing both of the buttons simultaneously will turn the sight off. The sight will shut off on its own after 14 hours if you don't touch a button on the sight. You can turn that feature off if you don't want your sight turning off, if you just want to turn it on and leave it on. I don't know what the runtime is, and it's going to vary probably depending on what battery you put into it. So let's talk about the battery. Over here on this side, we have the battery compartment, and it houses just a single CR123A battery, but you can put a high quality rechargeable lithium ion battery in here. And then over here on the other side, it has a micro USB port right here, and you can charge the sight using the micro USB port here if you have a rechargeable battery in the sight. I wouldn't do that if it's not a rechargeable battery. Don't use that feature. And back on the other side, you can see the cap. It has an O-ring seal on it, then it has a tether right here. So it will, if you drop the lens, or not the lens cover, but the cover to the battery port, it's not going to fall into the grass and be lost because it has that nice little tether. And then we have the quick detach mount, which is a simple throw lever. So you can stick it onto any 1913 rail, you can adjust the tension, flip that lever, and it's in place. Flip the lever again, take it off, and store it or whatever you want to do with it. Typically, I'll put a sight on a gun and just leave it there. I don't see much of a reason to take it off. So overall, I do like the UH1. It seems to be a fairly handy sight. It gives me a familiar sight picture with that circle. The human eye naturally tries to center things, and so I found that type of a reticle works really, really well, especially for me. Now, it is important to note that these types of sights are intended to be used with both eyes open, so don't do this and look through the sight. You can do that, but it's really intended both eyes open, then it will just superimpose that dot or that reticle on the target. I'm turning my rubber dummy around here. I'm gonna have to shoot him in the other arm. All right, one other thing that's interesting to note, the charging handle is non-reciprocating, so you don't have to worry about having your thumb there. I'm holding the gun like that, and you don't have to worry about that charging handle coming back and hitting you. Overall, I like this complete setup just the way it is with the Vortex red dot sight on there. Nice handy little setup for sure. So, I know the question, does it use Glock mags? Of course not. Does it 80s hip fire? Well, that we gotta find out. Yep, it 80s hip fires. Had to adjust my fire a little bit in the beginning, but once I got them on target, worked just fine. This would pass the 80s test. Before we take the UMP apart, let's talk about one thing that I like specifically about the 9mm versus the 45. When you load the 45 magazine, all the rounds come up to a single feeding point. It's not a true double stack. So when you load the 45, you have to push the round down and push it back. So now you have to push this one down with your index finger, start the next round and push it back. And you have to continue doing that to load the magazine. It's not particularly difficult, but it's not as simple as a true double stack like the 9mm. With the 9mm, all you have to do is place the round on top and push straight down, or at an angle, and screw it up. So you push the round straight down and it pops right in. So you don't have to worry about pushing the round down with an index finger or a thumb. You just keep laying the next round on top and pushing it straight down, just like you're loading an AR-15 magazine. So that's the differences between the two, and one of the reasons why I prefer the 9mm over the 45. All right, so now let's go ahead and field strip the gun here really quickly for you. I've done this in a previous video, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. First, you're going to make sure the weapon's clear, so I'm going to pull the bolt to the rear and lock it. Magazine is out of the rifle, and I check and look at the bolt, and there's no round in the chamber. So now I'm going to go ahead and let that bolt go home, and there's one takedown pin right here in the rear. And you can push it in from either side, pop that pin out, put it in the stock. There's a few different holes you can put it into the stock, but that keeps you from losing the pin. Now the trigger pack and magazine well will just kind of hinge down, and you can pull it off its perch. You have two pins right here that it connects to. All right. Now to get the bolt and recoil spring out of the gun, I'm going to go ahead and fold the stock partially by pushing down the release. And when I fold it around, it's just like the G36. Now you can reach inside there, pull out your recoil spring, and grab the bolt, which will slide right out and fall into your hand. So that's the gun completely field stripped. Really, those are your major components. From there, you can completely wipe the gun down and clean it. Now this, because it was a machine gun lower at one point, you can see where they've completely fused this polymer, so you cannot get the machine gun trigger components back into this lower. So this gun is permanently modified to only be a semi-automatic. And again, that comes directly from hkparts.net. Put it back together, you just reverse the process. Take your bolt, invert it, drop it into the receiver, push it forward, take your recoil spring with this little cone facing rearwards, put it inside, push that all the way forward, and now I can set my lower on. I can take those little hooks, hook them around the pin in the front, rotate this back. This little piece in the rear slides back and forth, push that forward, and then wiggle it until it drops down inside. Which it should do fairly easily. Swing that stock closed, pull the pin out, and you can again push the pin through from either side. I pushed it through from this side this time, and now the rifle's back together and ready to shoot. Very simple and easy to maintain. The whole reason we brought the 45 ACP version out this afternoon was so we could shoot them in the ice hole. There's my nice big ice hole. That's some thick ice. Huh. I want to turn back into water. It's more fun when it's water. Ice isn't as much fun. If you're looking to buy or build an UMP, you're going to spend a few $1,000s. Now, I can't really give you a price on how much a Tommy built will cost. That depends on what modifications you intend to do to the gun. So you're going to have to buy the USC carbine, either a you know, an early gray model or one of the new black ones, which I don't think are still in production anymore. I think it was a limited run. And then you're going to have to come up with the parts and then ship it to him and pay him whatever fee it is that he charges to put all the different components you want on the gun. You can make it any color you want. You can make it an SBR. You can have a long barrel, but you're going to have to buy the conversion kit from hkparts.net if you want a 9mm. So you're going to have the cost of that included, which would be a barrel and a different bolt and magazines. So there's a whole lot of things to consider, but be prepared to spend several $1,000s to do it. Now you can do the Gideon from Atlantic Firearms. You can pick up that polymer receiver and buy all the parts from hkparts.net and put the gun together yourself. They're fairly simple and straightforward to put together on your own, and that probably would be your most cost-effective option, doing it that way. But either way, these are really fun guns to shoot. They're interesting. I don't think that it solved any problems that the MP5 had. The MP5, I think, is still probably a superior, although more complex, 9mm carbine or submachine gun. This one's definitely more simplistic with its direct blowback. You don't have to worry about rollers going bad and locking pieces and all the other stuff that you have to deal with on the MP5, but they're still well-vetted, really reliable 9mm carbines or submachine guns, so this doesn't really solve any problem that gun had, in my opinion. If anything, this one has more of a recoil impulse that causes it to be harder to shoot full auto than the MP5 itself. But that's not something we really have to concern ourselves with, thanks to our government, which took machine guns away from us in 1986, newly made ones anyway. All right, so guys, if you would like to get notifications when we post a new video, there's a little bell. I think it's over here somewhere on your desktop browser. Click that bell. That bell will tell YouTube that you want to be notified when we post a new video. If you don't click that bell, you may not get the notification email. If you would like to support us directly here at the Military Arms Channel, the best possible way to do that is to become a Patreon supporter. There's a link down below. We are 100% viewer supported. We take no money from the industry. Also, if you'd like to support us, consider picking up a t-shirt from our Forged from Freedom t-shirt store. We have all sorts of funny and cool t-shirts, hoodies, and sweaters. Link down below. And swing by and check us out at coppercustom.com. Plus, we're Twitch gamers. So be sure to follow the link down below to Twitch and check us out on a live stream. If you're a Patreon supporter, send me a private message on Patreon and tell me your username, and you can play on a stream with us on the PS4. Guys, thanks for 11 years of support, and we'll talk to you guys soon. All right, the last magazine of the day, the saddest part of the day. I'm gonna go ahead and lock the bolt to the rear. And then we're gonna pack up and head out of this little frozen wasteland that is Northwest Indiana.